So I was just thinking about something. I saw a video where someone was talking a little bit about a woman that they were observing. And they were observing this woman's dynamics, specifically in her friendships. They stated that this woman had a pattern of bigging certain people up that she wanted to gain proximity to. And then she would be their friend for a little bit. And then after she was done using them up, they would fall out. She would start talking negatively about them, or sometimes she would just treat that friend as if they were an afterthought, despite the fact that this friend may have helped them with their style, despite the fact that their friend might have helped them, with, finding a love interest. Maybe there was a particular person who was close to a love interest, that they were personally fond of or that they were eyeing. And so they acted like they were friends with someone, or they gain access to a particular person under the guise of friendship to get with the particular love interest. And then once that happened, they disposed of them. So as I was thinking about that, I was like, wait a minute. I think there's so much discussion around, this concept of, I guess, someone using you in a romantic capacity. I think that especially amongst women, right? Where a lot of the time women have discussions about be careful of getting into a romantic partnership with someone who may be using you. But I don't think we talk enough about friends who try to use you as a stepladder. Friends who will strategically love bomb you to get what they want from you, whether it be status, whether it be styling tips, whether it be gaining access to your circle. It could be a platonic circle, it could be a professional circle, but how there are certain people who will get close to you under the guise of friendship, love bomb you, and then once they get what they want from you, they dispose of you. And one of the ways that they stated that this happens is through, this, I guess it's kind of like a buzzword now, but through this concept of destiny swapping and paying attention to a person's patterns. And I think that this is also evident if you are someone who's in kind of the clear, but maybe you have someone who's trying to get up under you and they're courting you really, really hard about friendship and wanting to be around you, wanting to hang with you. But I think it's important to look at a person's track record in this specific case. Now, granted, sometimes people just grow apart. Sometimes literally people move to different cities and states because of professional purposes. So that kind of causes a rift in, ready-made friendships and maybe even other relationships in their life. Naturally you kind of grow apart, or circumstances causes you to separate from certain people. And from there you have to build a new circle or a new friend group. But there are also instances where a person's inability to sustain friendships is intentional. And it's because they don't view friendships as, mutual partnership. They view it as a transaction. They view it as a stepping stone to get to where they want. And what this lady was mentioning, and it stood out to me like a sore thumb because I've seen this time and time again. This lady was mentioning the fact that this particular woman she was talking about would gain proximity to one person and then will kind of destiny swap with them, or try to destiny swap with them and shapeshift into that person. So for example, say that the friend from last year was really into photography. And once that person gained access to them because they felt like, well, this person's really successful doing photography. I'm looking at their numbers on TikTok, for example, or on Instagram. And I kind of want to jump on that wave too. I want to see what kind of traction I can get. And so they get up under that person, get free photographs and free photo shoots from them, etc. And then once they feel like they've used that person up, they move on to the other friend a year later who, for example, may be into cosmetology. And so they will utilize this friend up for all of their cosmetology services, getting free hairstyles, getting their makeup done for free, getting their nails and their feet done for free, etc. And then once they use that friend up, they move on to the next target that they want to leech off of. And I really want to caution women, when you realize that there is a platonic prospect, that person doesn't have a stable identity. Pay attention to that. That's a red flag. In an analysis that I actually did dissecting Carrie and Samantha's case in Sex and the City, I referred to it as envious enmeshment. And in that analysis, I talked a little bit about how when you're dealing with an envious person, there's typically a lack of identity. And that's why it's hard for them to build meaningful relationships with their platonic friends. They view it as a means to an end. They view it as something that's transactional because secretly they resent the friend for having the thing that they're trying to gain possession of themselves. So pay attention to that platonic prospect who just lacks an identity, or it's an unstable identity. Someone who isn't consistent when it comes to their presentation, when it comes to their interest. Now, granted, you can evolve from previous interests, you can evolve from certain hobbies, but I think there's a difference between you venturing out into something new because you're genuinely interested in doing so versus someone who's very flighty, if you realize that they just lack a stable identity altogether. I feel like it's apparent when someone may be picking up a new hobby for the sake of it versus someone who's constantly picking up new things to do because they don't have a stable sense of identity. Another thing is they lack authenticity. I think the biggest giveaway of this is when you realize that someone has a habit of talking negatively about a particular person and the next time you see them, they're all up in that person's face. I think these are the signs that needs to be taken into consideration. Pay attention to that. I know some people, they like to act like, well, that's just a sign of maturity. Or if it's in a professional space, that's just me being professional. No, there's a difference between you greeting someone and being respectful, being professional in an environment, and you being all up in their face, kikiing, laughing, cracking jokes, acting like you guys are cool, offering for them to hang out with you, saying like, yeah, girl, we should totally hang out. And yesterday, you were just ripping this person to shreds behind their backs. There is a difference. There's a difference between you being cordial and you being fake. So pay attention to that kind of person because even with their lack of identity, there's also a lack of loyalty. If someone can't even be loyal to their authenticity, it's going to be difficult for them to be loyal to other people. So if you realize that there's someone who's trying to gain access to your life, like they're fighting to gain access, but if you've ever peeped them talk badly about someone and then the next time you saw them around that person, they were smiling and acting super fake, be very careful before you give this person proximity. And I don't care how much they try to love bomb you, because typically someone who is that inconsistent and they're really good at it. You know how there are some people where they can't hide the fact that they don't like you? I know sometimes for people that can be uncomfortable. Like, why does person keep acting like that? Why they keep moving funny? But from my experience, I actually prefer the person who straight up doesn't like me and like who is willing to establish that distance because we know how to deal with one another. We know that we both don't like each other, so it's easier for us to be clear and to move accordingly. The person who's willing to quote unquote play the game with you is someone that you have to watch out for. That's the snake. For those of you all who may be wondering, well, how do I know how to set a boundary with a particular person who may be using me when I'm naturally a generous person? Like if I'm the kind of person where I don't really operate from a lack mindset, when I give to people, I don't keep score, I'm not tripping off of it. Anytime I give to someone, it's because I have more than enough to go around. It can be difficult for someone with that kind of mindset to set a boundary with someone who is very parasitic because you're not tripping off of it. And I'm gonna raise my hand on this one because this used to be me, especially in my college days. I had this so bad. Like I've always operated from an abundance mindset. So even when people felt like that they were using me, I wasn't tripping because I was always on to the next thing. So if someone was just like, oh girl, when you said that you went here, like, tell me a little bit more about that. Even if I got the inkling, like they were asking me questions because they wanted to sneak and do the same thing, I would just give them the information because I was like, it's not that deep. You could just ask me directly. Like, I don't care. But the downside of it is this, and I had to learn this the hard way, is there's no issue or there's no problem with you being a generous person, especially with people that you love and you care about, but most importantly, people who you trust, right? And they've shown reciprocity as well in their own right. So you may be someone who's very generous when it comes to like tangible items. There might be another friend who may not be as fortunate in that case, but they're very generous when it comes to their time and their assistance. Like if you all know the kind of people who like, they may not necessarily be able to help you with something tangibly, but you know that at the drop of a dime, if you need to call them to help you with like, I don't know, something in the house. If something fell apart in the house, they will be over to your house in like 10 to 15 minutes to help you rebuild it or to help you fix it or they will call someone and send them over to you, you know? So even when we talk about reciprocity, it's important for us to understand it may be complementary. Someone may be providing reciprocity to you, but it may not be in the same way that you reciprocate for them. But nevertheless, how I had to learn how to set a boundary is, even though I'm not tripping off of it, you don't want to keep people in your environment who are thinking that they're playing you. And they're kind of getting away with a narrative is like, oh, I'm not really cool with this person, I'm just using them to other people. Not necessarily saying you care about what other people think, but you just don't want to give snakes access to your life. But the reason why, even though I do have a more generous and abundant approach when it comes to like people that I care about, that I love, even though I have that disposition naturally, I had to learn more so like in my college days, what I said before, I had to learn how to set those firm boundaries because I had to come to terms with the fact that this person just doesn't like me like that though. Like it's a difference, it's a genuine difference between someone tolerating you because of the perks that may come with you. And that perk may be the fact that you are a very generous and, you know, abundant person. You know, you're someone who's always like, oh, you said you need this, or yeah, girl, I got you with this. And the downside of it is if this person isn't pouring back into you, that's not a friendship, that's a parasite. That's a leech. And as I stated before, you reciprocating doesn't always have to be in the same manner, but even with you being considerate about that other person. And I remember there was a particular, you know, acquaintance that I had in college, which at the beginning, I really thought it was a friend. Like she was playing the game. But when she started to get a little bit too comfortable, her disposition, she started to become more and more lax. And I could tell that she really didn't like me. Like there's certain things that she would do, and her other friends not liking me was a huge giveaway. And that's when it started to kind of like become clear to me. And this is why I encourage people, be mindful of that one friend who's always trying to monopolize all of your time too. Because sometimes they're protecting their resource and they don't want it to be dispersed out to other people because it's going to impact how much they're able to use you, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that that person respects you and values you. They're just being protective of the perks that comes with you, not you though. But I remember, sure enough, there was a span where me and this person, we weren't necessarily talking as much because we ended up shifting in majors. I stayed consistent with my major, but this person ended up, you know, going and pursuing another path. So obviously, like, we weren't in the same classes and stuff anymore. And with that being said, I ended up like establishing a new friend group. And that friend group was very reciprocal. Like it was just second nature. We all were like supportive of one another. We would go out to different restaurants, share notes with one another. We would get one another like coffees on campus. We would get one another like sushi on campus. It was just second nature for all of us to look out for one another. We would stay up to date with each other. And it was a night and day difference from the experience I had with this previous friend where this person only called when they needed something. They only called when they needed to vent. They only called when they needed the note for class. And I'm just like, okay, what has been going on in my life for like the first 2 years of this college experience? Like this is not, whatever I thought that was not a friendship. But lo and behold, I'm not someone who really trips off of it. So once we ended up, I don't know how this happened, but the friends that I had made and then this other friend who kind of like we went MIA to one another for some time, we ended up all in the same class at one point. And what was a giveaway for me is my friends embraced this person with open arms. But that's because I wasn't speaking negatively about this person. I was speaking highly about them. I was like, oh yeah, we've been cool for a minute, like all of that. But her friends always were looking at me crazy. Every time like we would get around one another, like if she had me come over to maybe like some kind of event or something, or if we met up at a spot on campus and her friends were around, her friends were always looking at me like I was insane. And I was like, that's so weird. I don't know where this energy is coming from because I've never talked to her friends before other than the moments where she would introduce me. And that's when I realized that she was saying something, like essentially the reputation that she gave me was preceding my presence. What do I mean by that? The narrative that she was carrying on about me to make me seem as if I was unappealing to this group, it had already taken root before these people could ever put a face to the name. So once I picked up on that, I was like, this is a night and day difference from the way that my friend group accepted you with open arms and were willing to help you. And that's when I actually started to get protective. And I started to set a line, in the sand as far as like, no, you can keep you and your funny friends, your funny style friends over here, and me and my friends, we're going to protect ourselves. And we're not going to allow anyone to, taint whatever we have going on, because clearly we're all on the same accord. And what's so ironic is during church service this past Sunday, as I was, listening to the sermon, the pastor was talking about how iron sharpens iron. And he was stating that a lot of the time the issues, and I want to think I was listening to a Stephen Darby, a Pastor Darby sermon earlier today too, where he was talking a little bit about, light has no fellowship with darkness. So there's just been this theme for the past couple of days, or what is it? It's Monday now that I'm recording this. So really the past 48 hours of the importance of understanding who has access to your life, because whoever has access to your life will start to dictate the trajectory of it. So whoever has access to your ears can dictate the trajectory of your life. Whoever has access to your mind can dictate the trajectory of your life. So you have to be intentional with people who are starting to show those red flags early on and start to set boundaries with them. I think another thing that's important for believers to understand is, as a Christ follower, boundaries are a part of the process. And that was depicted all throughout Scripture. Now, you don't necessarily repay people with evil. You don't meet them where they're at as far as their negative energy and their negative intentions. You don't want to compromise the light that God has blessed you with. But it is biblical for you to set a boundary with the person rather than you getting so riled up to the point that you slap them in the face, right? Or that you punch them in the face. I'm sure the Lord would much rather you be like, you know what, let me just set this boundary and separate myself. Ironically enough, as I'm stating this, the biblical story that I'm thinking of is Abraham and Lot. And Lot was his cousin. And after Abraham started to realize we both have too much stuff going on, so now we're going to have to separate. Abraham made that call because he was setting a boundary with Lot. He was like, Lot, I think you're getting a little bit too comfortable. Like, I think I've helped you enough. And now I realize where we're at right now, we both can't occupy this space. So tell me which way you want to go, and I'll go the exact opposite way. So boundaries are biblical. But nevertheless, to help people understand a little bit more about the importance of detecting someone who's using you as a stepladder, I'm going to read from the leech envious archetype in the book Green Eyes. And it reads, an envious person who is a leech will obsess over what you have to the point they aim to possess it as well. This is much more severe than simply being inspired by someone or aspiration. The leech aims to ride off of your coattails because they secretly despise that it's you and not them. Their desire is more so covetous and is rooted in jealousy and envy. A leech does not simply want something similar. They want exactly what you have in the same manner you received it and around the same time. When a person is envious of you and acquires the disposition of a leech, they are taking advantage of the exclusive access they have to gain as much information regarding the target's essence, tips, strengths, and accomplishments in order to replicate it. However, it doesn't stop with mere replication. The goal is to replicate and replace. This person will aim to become their target of envy to eventually cancel them out and take their place. So in some babes, be careful with being Barbara the bestie builder, okay? Because your friend or that person who you're calling a friend may dispose of you at the drop of a dime after they finish using you up, okay? It's important for you to have people around you who reciprocate and who are respectful towards you, okay? So that's all that I have for this video today. I want to thank you all so much for tuning in. But of course, I want to hear you all's comments, opinions, perspectives, as well as personal experiences with a situation like this in the comment section below. I look forward to speaking to you guys in the next one, babes. Take care.